Good afternoon. This is Joe Pryor with the virtualrealestateteam.com in Oklahoma City. It is Saturday, March 5th, and I want to do another video on short sales. In fact, a specific part of short sales, which I regret to say happens, which is HUD fraud or short sale fraud, as well as deceptive practices. Now, I recently did a video about the new Federal Trade Commission rulings that I think are very, very good. You know, it's a situation where I know there's people out there, you know, they're going, well, you know, I don't like government regulation. I don't like any government regulation. Well, folks, you know, if we were all angels, we wouldn't need it. And people do take advantage, and I think it's very important that there are regulations that create transparency where people are not deceived or they're not told something that can't be delivered. And that's one of the reasons the Federal Trade Commission came in, to make sure that you knew that you shouldn't give upfront fees to people for services that have not been rendered yet, that people don't try to deceive you and say you're part of the government, they're part of the government, or that they're specially allied with a lender and only they can help you, or they tell you never communicate again with a lender when you should. And so that was the video I previously did, but I want to get back into the short sale fraud, because I've been seeing some things lately I find are disturbing. You know, last year I was posting information about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and talking about what constitutes third-party fraud, as well as information from the Department of the Treasury, Department of Justice, and how they wanted to prosecute that. In other words, where somebody would come in and put themselves in the middle without really any intention of closing and skim profits that should go to the lender. Now, you know, I know there's also a lot of negative attitude towards banks out there, and they go, oh, well, good grief, they probably deserve it. But, you know, my mother was right many, many years ago, and as I've gotten older, I've learned to trust the wisdom of my mother. And she told me when I was very, very young, two wrongs don't make a right. And I absolutely believe that to be true. Whether you think that regulation is right or whether the banks were doing right or doing wrong, it doesn't mean that we should, in our industry, do things that are wrong. That is not a good example to be set. And what I want to talk to you about is a variation on the theme, you know, and this probably disturbs me as much as anything. When people know that fraud is being perpetuated by these schemes, and they go, well, you know, I think I've got a clever workaround. And anytime you have to do something like that, you need to stop and question yourself if you've got to do something clever in order to think that maybe that's okay. And this is where someone comes to you and they say, look, I tell you what, here's how it's not going to be a problem. I'm going to become an owner of your property. So, you know, instead of doing it the old way, which is I do a contract that's signable and then I get the realtor that was listing with you to list with me for a higher amount, and I do a back-to-back closing and take $10,000 or $20,000 that should go to the bank because they're asking us to get fair market value for you, then here's what we'll do. You'll sign the deed over to me. Now, there's two things that can be done with that deed, one of which is that the deed can be held and not filed as of record. Well, folks, if it's not filed, then they don't have title to your property in any way, shape, or form. Now, the other thing for them to do is to go ahead and file it. Well, if that's the case, then two things can happen, especially in FHA, which is no short sale, because that is considered fraud on their part, or the fact is that what you've done is something without permission. When you do an FHA loan, for instance, it is considered assumable only with the okay of the lender, and that new buyer of your property has to come in and qualify for it, and that obviously isn't being done. And here's what disturbs me the most. What they're asking to do is get maybe that $5,000, $10,000, or $20,000, whatever it is, on top, and they are not telling the lender this. And the lender wants transparency. They want to get fair market value. Now, again, going back, I'm not here to pronounce judgment on the banks one way or the other. What I am saying is that these people do not have any intention of closing on their own. And the most disturbing fact is that you may be caught short on this by the lender. In other words, you may have just jeopardized your ability to do a short sale, or if it's not sold at that higher amount of money, then that particular person just basically walks away, especially if they haven't filed the deed. and you're left holding the foreclosure and you're devastated. I know what I would do in a situation like that. I'd start talking to an attorney about it because that person just put me in jeopardy. They just put me into foreclosure, had my credit report lowered 300 points. I can't get a loan. I may not be able to get an FHA loan for 5 to 7 years from now. I may need to borrow money because of a medical problem that I can't borrow now. And that's a devastating thing to a family. So if these people come to you, and some of them are realtors, and I'm sorry to say that that's true, and they offer to do this with you, my suggestion is talk to your lender, because I know what your lender will say, and that is no. And I know what the lender will say to that third party if they were transparent and they said, oh, Bank of America, by the way, I want you to know that I'm actually making $10,000 more on this property, that actually you took a short sale at a lower value and I'm making money. And I know what the lender will say. Number one, no. Number two, you just committed fraud. So this is for those folks out there that are in distress, because I understand the pressure that you're under. I understand that this may seem like the silver bullet as a solution, but it's not. It is not that. It is not something that you're going to benefit from. In fact, it could make you and everyone else involved in a transaction a party to fraud, whether you know it or not. So do things right, do things ethically, do things legally, check with your lender, check with government regulations, get on Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac's websites to find out more about that. Call me, because I want it done right. I want to rescue from foreclosure, and that's what good short sale realtors do. So this is Joe Pryor with a virtual real estate team in Oklahoma City, where we deliver traditional real estate values with the speed of technology.